Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Before we begin today's webinar, Osteoporosis Canada acknowledges the land that our offices located in Toronto are on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. My name is Tracie Napoli, and I'm the Director of Fund Development and MARCOM at Osteoporosis Canada, and I will be your host for today. We wish to thank thinkbee.ca for their partnership for helping us put this cook along webinar together. In addition to everyone who will be cooking along today, we have Zoom attendees, and we are also live streaming this webinar on the Osteoporosis Canada Facebook page. So a big welcome to everyone who is watching today. This webinar will provide general information about cooking and food knowledge. It is not intended as individualized health or nutrition advice. If you have questions about nutrition, consult a physician or registered dietitian. Now, during the webinar, if you are watching on Zoom, you can enter questions by clicking the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Or if you are watching via Facebook, you can enter your question in the comments section. We will do our best to answer as many questions as we can during the webinar within the time available. Osteoporosis Canada is working to provide strategies, new ideas, and recipes to help you get the bone-building nutrients needed for bone health. Nutrition is a key component for strengthening and maintaining healthy bones, as well as in the prevention and management of osteoporosis. Calcium, vitamin D, and protein are essential nutrients for proper bone health. Osteoporosis Canada recommends including protein in your diet to benefit muscle and bone health at every meal. Some examples are beef, eggs, fish, poultry, pork, tofu, legumes, nuts, milk, yogurt, and cheese. And tonight, two of the main ingredients in tonight's recipes are beef and milk. Beef has many essential nutrients packed into each small serving and provides nutrients that are difficult to get from other foods like iron, zinc, and vitamin B12. Milk products are a key source of essential nutrients like calcium that is more readily absorbed by the body, as well as protein plus magnesium, zinc, vitamin A, vitamin D, and potassium. So let's start cooking. Today's featured recipe is arugula and roasted red pepper meatball pasta. It's a quick and delicious dinner, which is perfect for any night of the week, with 46 grams of protein and 450 milligrams of calcium per serving. You can find today's featured recipe, along with others, by visiting osteoporosis.ca/recipes. I will also be sure to put the link to the recipe in the chat and in the comments section on Facebook. It's now my pleasure to welcome Emily Richards, a professional home economist, freelance food writer, chef, and she is the author and co-author of 10 cookbooks. Emily also writes and develops recipes for print and online publications that include everyday cooking and healthy eating. And she can be found on TV, radio, and webcasts just like this one. Please welcome Emily.
Thanks, Tracie. Hey, everybody. Oh, thank you. Thank you for the applause. But I am no ski jumper and I am no great skater. That's a salute to our Canadian Olympians that are working hard for the country and for them. And they would love this meal, by the way. Packed with protein and calcium, they got to keep their bones strong. And so do we. So we are cooking this fabulous weeknight meal together. And the first thing that I always like to let everybody know is that I have the recipe close by. You should too. It's always good to have your ingredients out, but I always have the recipe close by to make sure that A, I'm going to be measuring everything out correctly, and B, that everything actually goes in. So for those of you that are following along, if you took a look at the recipe and you notice I forget something, let me know. So when we're doing these cook-alongs, we kind of take apart the recipe a little bit differently because we want to keep food safe in the kitchen. So what we're going to do is actually work with the vegetables and our dry ingredients and measure everything out, and then we're going to bring out the beef. Now, meatball seems you know, like a pretty standard meal. It's a regular in my house. And you might be thinking, well, I don't have time to roll meatballs, Emily. It's a busy week. We're not rolling meatballs tonight, everybody. We're dropping them. And we're gonna drop them in a hot pan and create a really quick meal. So some of the things my cook-along friends should have is a pot of water on the stove. The prep that we have to do is actually quite quick. So if you know that your stove is a little bit slow and that pot of water is going to take forever to boil, you might want to get it started. I'm going to turn mine on just so that it's ready. And I have a pot of water on my back burner here so that I can cook up front. Okay, so that'll be ready to go. And once the water comes to boil, we'll add some salt before we add the pasta. So what we're going to start off with is our vegetables. So we're building flavor in the sauce. The beef meatballs are going to give us lots of flavor and create a wonderful texture to our sauce, but we want to enhance it with some flavor starters. And one of the most common ones are onions and garlic, and they're great because they're pantry staples. A lot of the ingredients that go into meatballs are things that you can have on hand all the time. Breadcrumbs, eggs, onions, garlic, all those types of things. We're actually going to be using the onions and garlic in the sauce. So that's what's going to kind of create that wonderful texture and flavor in the sauce. So you may have got, well, I know you got an onion in your cook-along kit. And it may be large, it may be small. We really only need a small onion, unless you're an onion lover, okay? If you are an onion lover, you can use a really large onion. If you've got a large onion and you don't love onions, just use half. So I determine a large onion if it's bigger than the size of my hand. So this is actually a medium-sized onion, which is perfectly fine to use. And this one, I can kind of close my hand around it, so it's a fairly small onion, okay? So we're gonna start with our onion, and then we're gonna move on to our garlic. Now, because the onions and garlic go together, if you have a little prep bowl, like I do here, you can have that ready to add them together, okay? So this is our mise en place time, where we're gonna get everything ready so that when we go to put together our meal, it comes together fairly quickly, okay? All right, so we're gonna start off with our onion. And as you know, onions are round. So we're going to create a flat side so that we can actually cut easily. So I'm gonna just trim off, this is our stem end here that I'm just gonna trim off. So that'll give me a flat side to cut the onion in half, okay? So my hands are gonna go on both sides, cut the onion in half, and then I'm gonna peel it. Now we're not actually chopping the onion tonight, we're just gonna thinly slice it. If you want a finer onion in your sauce, you can chop it, okay? But we're gonna be slicing it fairly thin, so it'll be kind of, it'll melt in the sauce while it's building flavor. So I'm just gonna peel that outer layer of the onion off, just like so. Oh, I got that little, there we are. Okay. And then I'm just gonna put that aside for the moment. So this is our root end here. Now, because we're gonna be thinly slicing it, we can actually trim that right off, okay? So just with a little slice, you can trim off that end as well. And I actually like slicing my onions lengthwise. So instead of having half moon shape, we're gonna have nice thin straight slices. So just hold on with your one hand, and then with your knife, you're just going to kind of come up and down. And the closer your knife is with each slice, the thinner your onion slices will be, okay? So if you, again, if you want that really nice thin onion slice, you can just go nice and slow. And when you get to the point of the onion where you feel like it's gonna fall over, you can actually flip it over and then just keep slicing, okay? And then we'll do the other half. Now, if you, let's say you were making this and you didn't have groceries delivered to your house, you could use any type of onion you had at home. You could even use a shallot or green onion if you wanted to. You basically want to have that little bit of a starter flavor. I've also made this pasta with leeks. So if you have a leek at home that's kind of in the crisper waiting to be used, I would just use the light green and white part of the leek, but you can definitely use it in the recipe as well. Okay, I'm going to put that in my prep bowl, just like that. I'll get the rest of my sliced onion here. And then we're going to move on to our garlic. Okay. I'm going to add my skins and bits to my compost pile. There we go. And we're going to move on to our garlic. So we need 2 cloves of garlic for this recipe. And as you probably all know, garlic cloves vary in size. So if you have a really large clove of garlic, you could use 1, or if they're a little bit smaller, you could use 3 or 4. If you happen to love garlic, you can even double up and go to 3 or 4 cloves of garlic. So I'm going to use 2. This one's fairly large, but I think I can handle it. And what we're going to start off with is peeling the clove first. So what I like to do is just use the side of my knife and put it on the garlic clove and then just gently bash it. I'm not smashing it. I don't want it all over the cutting board. I just want to hit it till I hear the skin crack, okay? And it really doesn't take that much. You just hear that skin crack and then you can pop it right out of the skin, okay? Just like so. And I'm going to do the second one at the same time. There. Now, sometimes it's really fresh garlic, the skin tends to stick a little bit. So you could just use a little paring knife and peel off the skin if that's easier for you, okay? So we are going to mince our garlic here. And that is going to give us a nice fine texture of the garlic. It kind of really melts right into the sauce. So here I have that root end, very similar to the onion. I'm leaving that intact, okay? That's gonna hold the garlic clove together. So now I'm gonna use my finger and thumb and just the tip of the knife. I'm gonna make lengthwise cuts, not all the way through because I want my garlic clove to stay together. And again, the closer your knife is, the smaller or finer your mince will be. Then I'm gonna flip it over and do the exact same thing. Now, if you are uncomfortable using your chef's knife doing this, you can always use a paring knife, okay? Because it's a little bit smaller, it might be a little bit more comfortable for you to use a smaller knife. And then what I'm gonna do is that same motion we did with the onion. I'm just going to go up and down. And again, the tighter that cut is, the smaller your mince will be, okay? This is a good time to stay focused on the garlic and your hands. So
is it a good time to ask a question, Emily?
Sure, yeah, for sure.
So we had someone ask us, they are allergic to things like onions and garlic. What else could they use to add flavor to the recipe?
So if it is the entire kind of onion family, then that wipes out obviously a lot. But because the meatballs themselves were adding flavor to them, they're going to start off with that flavor in the sauce. We are also adding spices to the meatballs, and then we're also adding a little bit of kick with hot pepper flakes. So we're really kind of balancing it out with different things. You could also use other vegetables to provide flavor because that will, as long as they caramelize, they will start to build flavor in the pan before the milk goes in to create the sauce. So, you know, oftentimes we think of, I'm going to use zucchini because a lot of people think that zucchini has no flavor. But once you start to brown it and caramelize it, it actually does build flavor. And that little bit of caramelization that happens in the pan carries over into the sauce. So you could thinly slice a small zucchini or a small pepper and use that in the beginning of the sauce making process, the same way you would with the onion. So hopefully that helps.
That's great. Thanks, Emily.
No problem. So if you want to mince your garlic a little bit finer, you can just kind of put it in a pile and go back and forth with your knife just to make it a little bit smaller, just like that. And then you can add this to your onions because those are going to be cooked at the same time. So it's always a good idea when you're looking at your recipe that you're making, kind of group things together. So if things are going to be cooked together, you can put them in the same bowl. And I know oftentimes, you know, especially when you're watching, let's say, food shows or cooking shows online or on television, you see that they have a lot of bowls out. It really is helpful. I'm not saying you have to have 20 bowls in front of you, but it is really helpful when you're cooking at home to have all those ingredients. because that little process makes the cooking time shorter, okay? Because everything's there ready to go. So I'm gonna do this other clove of garlic. And the reason why I like mincing the garlic this way is because I don't end up, you know, smashing it, having all the garlic juice all over the cutting board. And I'm losing a lot of flavor, and I really want that flavor in the sauce. Okay, so this way I know it's gonna go in there. And then I'm just gonna mince this one up a little bit more, like so. And I'm gonna add that to my pile. So this is great because there isn't really a lot of chopping that we have to do tonight for our meatball recipe. And some of the ingredients we have, we're going to be using straight out of the jar or the container. So we don't actually have to chop them or further process them. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my knife and my sticky fingers, you may have sticky fingers as well, to the sink. And what I like to do is just run my knife and my fingers under the water, cool water, and rub the knife. I'm cleaning the knife. I'm taking the stickiness off my hand. And it also helps remove some of that garlic aroma, okay? And then this way your knife is ready for the next time you need it. There we are. Okay, taking a peek at my water. So if you didn't turn on your water, definitely turn on your water now, because I think that we're at a good spot. Onions and garlic are done. We are going to measure out the ingredients for the meatball. Okay, so you need a large bowl that will accommodate your beef. You don't need your beef yet. Okay, mine's tucked away in the refrigerator. We're gonna get our other ingredients ready, which is where I'm gonna get closer to my recipe here so that I can not screw it up. All right, so we're gonna need some dry measuring cups. The nesting measuring cups is what we're gonna use, and some measuring spoons. Okay, and we're gonna put our dry ingredients into our bowl, and then we'll add the beef kind of near the end. So let's start off with our breadcrumbs. We need a 1/4 cup of seasoned breadcrumbs. The reason why we're using seasoned breadcrumbs is because they have flavor. If you need a gluten-free variety, they do have seasoned gluten-free variety of breadcrumbs that you can use. You could also make your own and just add a little bit of Italian seasoning or dried oregano or thyme, anything like that, and you'll have your own seasoned breadcrumbs. Then we're going to add some Parmesan cheese. So in the ingredient list, you'll notice that the Parmesan cheese says 2/3 cup divided. So that means we're using some in our meatballs and then we're saving some for later, okay? To garnish the top. So you all got this lovely container of fresh parm. And I want you to pack in, and by pack, I'm gonna use my 1/3 cup measure. I want you to press it into that measuring cup so that you get a good amount of grated Parmesan cheese, okay? Just like that. Now, if you happen to have a chunk of Parmesan cheese, you could freshly grate it. And because it's so light and airy, you definitely want to pack it in because we're adding flavor to our meatballs with the Parmesan, but it's also acting as a little bit of a filler to kind of add flavor to the meat and make it a little bit, kind of extend it almost a little bit. I love Parmesan in my meatballs. You don't always have to. Obviously, if there's a dairy allergy, you could use a vegan option, okay? But they are absolutely fabulous. One of my favorite ingredients in there. We are also going to add some seasonings. So we're changing it up a little bit. We're going to use dried pantry seasoning. So you got garlic powder and hot pepper flakes. If you don't want to use garlic powder, you could always use a small clove of garlic in here, okay? So that would just mean chopping up or mincing up another clove of garlic. But we need 1 teaspoon of garlic powder. So I'm just going to measure that out and add that to the bowl. And then I'm also going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of hot pepper flakes. Now, if you're worried these are going to be a little too spicy, you could add just a pinch if you want. You could also substitute black pepper, okay? Fresh ground black pepper would work here as well. So that's going to go into our meatballs. And then if you take a look, we have half a teaspoon of salt divided. So again, that divided means that we're gonna put some in our meatballs and then some in our sauce. So we need a 1/4 teaspoon of salt that's gonna go into this bowl as well. Okay. And then I'll just make sure that I have 1/3 cup breadcrumbs, garlic powder, and hot pepper flakes. Perfect. And then we're gonna add our egg into this bowl. So we're using large eggs. These ones happen to be a little bit, I think the ones that everybody got are extra large. So once we add our beef and mix it together, if it's a little bit too wet, we'll add a little bit more breadcrumbs, but I think we'll be okay. So I'm just gonna crack my egg off to the side and then get it right into the bowl. Okay. If you happen to have a fork handy or spoon, anything like that, you can just kind of give that a little mix. Like that. And then I'm going to grab my beef from the refrigerator. So if your beef is already out, you can open up the package. I'm just gonna grab mine. And we are using lean ground beef. Now this is fabulous for weeknight meals. I actually used it 3 times already today. This is the 3rd time that I'm using it. I made different meatballs, actually the same meatballs with a different sauce. I made nachos. So I had made chili yesterday and I made nachos with them. And then I'm making these meatballs. So it is super versatile for so many things. And not only that, it freezes really well. So I always have it on hand in the freezer and I make many, many different things with it. So just kind of off the top of my head, that's what I ended up making the last 2 days. All right, so we're gonna open this package. Now, does this one have a, no, it doesn't. I'm gonna do it this way so that I try not to make a mess. I'm gonna open it from behind. So you can add your beef right into that bowl and start mixing it together. Now, if you don't want to use your hands, you don't have to. You can use your fork or your spoon, whatever you happen to have handy. Or if you have gloves that you like to use in the kitchen, which I do, I keep vinyl gloves on hand, like they're literally right here all the time. And I do that because oftentimes, and I'm sure it's all happened to you, you might have to answer your phone because it's an emergency, or you know, your kids might need something, or someone's at the door because something's getting delivered. So you can pull off the gloves and kind of run to where you have to go.
And Emily, I just wanted to jump in because we're always talking about budget-friendly meals. So if ground meat is on sale, you could pick up more than 1 package, toss it in the freezer, and then this is like a pantry staple. You've got pasta, roasted jarred peppers, you've got meat in the freezer, and you pull it out and you have a quick dinner.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that kind of we have to remember. Oftentimes when we hear pantry, I'd like people to kind of step outside of the actual pantry. So the actual cupboard, for example, or shelves, that you think about what, you know, can last a long time in your refrigerator and your freezer. And ground beef is definitely one of those ones that keeps beautifully in the freezer. And if you think about it, I always have milk in my freezer. Actually, I do have milk in my freezer, but mainly in my fridge, because you can freeze milk too. And so it is one of those staples. But if you think of other things like onions and garlic, those are, you know, pantry staples as well. And outside of that, we're not using any tonight, but things like carrots and celery, they all really build wonderful flavored recipes. And if you have all those things, you can make a really nice meal. So I'm just gonna, off the top of my head, if you have celery and carrots and onions and garlic and that ground beef, you have the start of a beautiful chili, or you have the start of a sauce, or even a soup if you have some broth kicking around. So it is something that can really be changed up and made into so many different things. So what I want to do here is just kind of make sure that my mixture is kind of even throughout the beef. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm not squeezing the beef. This is something that is what I do personally because I like to kind of keep the texture of the ground beef. So I tend to just kind of fold it in. just like this. I often see people going in there with their hands and squeezing it, and it's usually kids 10 and under like to do that, which is really fun. But I enjoy just kind of folding everything in to make sure that it's nice and even, okay? And once you see that it's kind of distributed throughout the beef, this is also something that my grandmother used to do when she made her meatballs. And this is something, you don't have to do it if you don't feel comfortable, but all she would do is take the bowl and smell the meat. If it smells delicious now, just imagine what it's going to smell like when it's cooked, okay? So you should smell the little bit of spices, you should smell the cheese in there, the seasoned breadcrumbs, so you know that that's the start of something delicious.
So what I did say was, if you wanted to, you can actually roll these into meatballs. Traditional meatballs, no problem, but we're going to take the easy way and just scoop them and brown them in the pan. So then that led me to the water. If your water is boiling, you can add some salt to it now, because we're going to measure out our pasta and get it into the pot, okay? So we're kind of going to be doing things simultaneously here. So if you have a partner in the kitchen, perfect, because there's two things for you to do. And if you don't have a partner in the kitchen, make sure that your pots are close together so you can keep an eye on them. So I'm going to just set my ground beef mixture here aside, and we're going to measure out our pasta. So I made note to all our cook along friends tonight that pasta boxes, bags have changed in weight all over the place. So some of them are smaller, some of them are larger. We are only using 3 cups of dry pasta. And in the box that you got, it's actually 4.5 cups that comes in this box. So if you'd like, you can cook all the pasta tonight, and then I'll show you what to do and how to reserve some and keep it for later in the week so you can use it in another recipe. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cook this whole box of pasta and take some out because we don't need it all. But if you just want to use what's in the recipe, you need 3 cups of penne pasta. Okay, any short pasta will do. I just love the penne because the sauce kind of sneaks into the tubes and it's really, really delicious. So if your water's boiling and your salt is in there, make sure you put your pasta in. And that's what I'm going to do. So my pasta water is in. I'm going to make sure that I stir that pasta. And if you don't have a colander, get one in your sink, okay? And penne, I like to cook it anywhere between 8 to 10 minutes. And because I want to add it to the skillet to kind of cook through, finish cooking and gather the flavor of the sauce, it's good to have it just a little bit kind of less al dente than perhaps you normally would, okay? Now we're going to start cooking. I'm going to bring this here and do this and get all my ingredients close by. And I'm going to start off with some oil in the pan, okay? So I'm just using a neutral oil in the pan so that the flavor comes through, and just a couple tablespoons. You don't need very much. If you're using a regular skillet as opposed to a non-stick, you might find you need a little bit more. So everyone knows their cookware best. So if you're using non-stick, you should be okay with the 2 tablespoons, okay? So we are going to brown our meatballs first. You have some options here tonight. I'm using a little ice cream scoop, okay? If you don't want to use an ice cream scoop, I love, everyone's showing me their ice cream scoops. I love it. If you don't have an ice cream scoop, you can use just a tablespoon and drop it. And all you're going to do is go into your bowl and just start doing this. Now, your option is how big do you want these? Let's consider your mouth. You want to be able to kind of put them in your mouth, and we want them to cook fairly quickly. So we want to make sure that they're all about the same size, okay? So just kind of haphazardly drop them around, and they will start to brown because we did heat up that oil in our pan a little bit, okay? So this is a little bit more of a rustic meatball, which is totally okay, because for a weeknight meal, you might not have time, or you might not have help to roll those meatballs. This is a great way to do it. Now, if you wanted to, this is a little kind of make ahead. If you have time in the morning to make this meatball mixture, you could actually put it into a Ziploc bag or a resealable bag and just pop it in the fridge, so that when you come home, you can squeeze it out of the Ziploc bag and just cut it right out into the pan. Okay, so it ends up looking a little bit more like sausage pieces. But I like doing it this way. It's kind of fast and easy. And I don't have to transfer it into anything. There we go. So just a couple more pieces here, and it's already starting to smell wonderful. As soon as that beef hits the pan, there. I'm gonna go back and stir my pasta. Keep an eye on that.
Emily, we have another question. Sorry.
Sure.
We have another question. Somebody asked if they wanted to use lean ground beef. Is that going to really affect things if they wanted to use extra lean or lean ground beef?
So we are using lean ground beef tonight. And this recipe works across the board with any beef that you want to use. So if you have extra lean, it will work as well. Because what we're looking for in the end, I'm just turning the heat down a little bit so they don't go too quickly. What we're looking for in the end is to have the meatball cooked through. And there's a couple ways we're going to take a look at that when it's time. We're going to look at the temperature, and we're also going to just simply cut it through and make sure that it's no longer pink inside. So across the board, any of those ground beefs will work beautifully. Okay, so with protein, and I don't know if you can see, kind of you can see what's happening, but it always kind of cooks around the edges first. And we're looking for that like little bit of change of color around the edge. And then you're going to flip your meatballs and look at how that golden brown color comes through very quickly. And that's that caramelization that is starting with the protein. Okay, we're going to go through the same process when we add our vegetables, but here we're getting that flavor transfer from the beef into our skillet, and then also into the beef, that nice bit of caramelization. Okay, so just make sure that you flip all your meatballs. And this is an initial stage of cooking. We're not cooking them through at this point. Okay, we're just trying to get some color and flavor from our beef. There we go. And then we're going to transfer them into a plate. So if you don't have a plate handy, you will need a plate because that's where we're putting our meatballs. Okay. I see lots of steam happening, so that means the pasta's cooking. Lots of movement. I see tongs and hands. Meatballs are happening. This is awesome. And hopefully it smells great in your kitchen, because I know it smells great here too. Thumbs up, always good. And for those of you, I did mention in the beginning, but if you need to relax and have a drink while you're cooking, please feel free, whether it's club soda, wine, whatever you want to have. It is a cream sauce, even though it's beef, goes good with white wine. I know that might shock some of you, but white wine would be perfect with this meal. So is red, so whatever you like, even a nice crisp, cool beer. Or a glass of milk, don't you think, Tracie?
I think that's a great choice. I don't know, that's what I grew up drinking when we had dinner. So that sounds great. And I don't know if you can hear the sizzling behind me. I don't know if that means I'm burning anything. It smells good. But I wanted to, because when we do these cooking demos, we always want to talk about substitutions and ways to make your life easy. So, I mean, it's great if you want to share with us in the chat, like, what would make you want to cook more? And it's not just cook anything, it's cooking meals that have the bone building nutrients you need. So also to be aware of substitution. So the beef is great, whatever kind of beef you want to get that protein. The milk also is a source. And I know we're going to get questions on the milk and also the cheese. So if you wanted to do, I'm not sure, Emily, about a dairy-free version, you could let us know about that. And also we're getting questions on gluten-free. So you've already talked about the gluten-free breadcrumbs, but then also some of the other ingredients. I'm throwing it all at you while the meatballs brown. So I can go turn them.
In the meatballs itself, we did have the breadcrumbs. So gluten-free breadcrumbs, definitely there. We chatted a bit about the alternative for the Parmesan. So using a non-dairy based Parmesan, because they are on the market. So you could definitely use that. So that's kind of the starter. And I know eggs sometimes come up as an ingredient substitution where you may not be able to enjoy eggs as part of a meal. And so in this case, you could leave it out and it would still come together. But you could also just substitute it with a little bit of an egg substitute, or you could just use some ground flax and water, and that will actually give it a little bit of moisture and texture as well, which is really nice. So that's a few options for some of those substitutions. But as we get into the sauce, I'll talk more about those substitutions. I'm just gonna give my pasta a stir. And one of the things, just because I love talking about pasta, I took out my meatballs, just in case you didn't notice, as we were chatting here. And I'm going to add my onions and garlic now into our same pan. So if you can see, there's that little residual leftover of the oil from browning, as well as our little bits of beef in there that are going to help build the flavor of the sauce and add some color. That golden brown color is going to be in our sauce. So I'm going to add my onions and garlic. We're just going to saute that for a little bit. And we're not doing this on medium high. We've reduced the heat a little bit here because we don't want to scorch the onions or the garlic. I do want to get just a little bit of color on them.
So Emily, I'm going to ask you, ooh, that went flying. That was, and that's great, right? That's real cooking. Put it back in the pot as I'm leaving the sizzling meatballs on. So we had a question, and when I saw the question, I think I gasped. Now, maybe Emily will disagree, but we had a question asking, let's see who it was. Do we rinse our pasta? No, right, Emily? We don't rinse pasta.
So let's be fair.
No, and it's okay that the person asked the question. I just wanted
to be fair to everybody who does not know Tracie and myself. Yes. We are both of Italian heritage. So we do have a tendency to
get a little sensitive about the pasta question.
There is a place to rinse pasta. So tonight's not that night. No. But I will tell you, because if you are cooking your whole box, you will have to rinse some off. So I'm actually going to talk about that, which means I'm going to check my pasta one more time, because I'm actually going to taste it this time for two things. I'm going to taste the pasta for flavor because of the salt in the water. I want it to taste good, and also texture. It's done. I got to drain it. So what am I looking for? A nice, I don't want it to be mushy. I want a nice slight bite to the pasta. And once you have achieved that, you're going to just drain it. Okay. So I'm going to do that in my colander in the sink. And then I'm going to bring my pasta over here, so it's close to me. And then we'll talk about pasta a little bit more here. So as I left my onions, they started to brown, which is perfect, which means now we can start the sauce. Isn't that exciting? This is where we're going to add our 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour. Okay. So we're going to sprinkle that over top. And the reason why we're adding it at this point is it will absorb any residual water that we have in the onions and garlic that came out in the pan. We're also toasting the flour a little bit, so it will cook that kind of rawness out of the flour and add flavor into our sauce. Okay, so just like that. And then this is where we're going to add our milk. So we are using 2% milk tonight. If you ran out of 2% milk and you only had whole milk or 1%, you could definitely substitute any milk. Okay. So usually what ends up happening is this is when all the questions come up about what can I use if I can't have milk? Well, luckily there's lots of options. I'm just measuring out my milk here. we need 2.5 cups of the milk, okay? So I'm gonna measure it 2 cups here, and then I'm going to switch to my whisk. And the reason why I'm switching to a whisk for my sauce is just so that I can help the flour combine into the milk, okay? So I'm going to add 2 cups here. So for those of you that use non-dairy beverages, you could definitely substitute those for the milk. But you definitely want to make sure that you're using one that has, there's actually some great ones that have calcium as well as protein in them, okay? So all you have to do is read the label, and that's how you'll find out. So it's a great option for you, okay? So I'm just gonna add that 1/2 cup in here as well. Set that aside. And whisk that in. So you want to just give that a little whisk all the way around. Okay. And that's just going to help break down the flour. And I love making sauce in skillets because it cooks faster. You have a larger surface area, so it tends to simmer a little bit faster. And when we put our meatballs back in, they can sit in a single layer and cook more evenly, which is really nice. Okay. Did I answer kind of the question about the substitute for the milk? Tracie, do you think that was good? Or
I bet you did. I didn't actually hear it because I thought this would be a good idea for the first time to cook with you while hosting. I've turned stuff off. I can't do it. So I will make mine after. And yeah, but no, whatever you said, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, what did you say? That was good. You're
Yes,
always on the mark.
yes. I did mention non-dairy beverages.
Yes, yeah,
And
because we know
mentioned to look
Yeah.
for the ones that have protein as well
Yes.
as the calcium.
absolutely, absolutely. And let me just make sure let me just see about somebody asked about what is if you don't want to consume dairy products, but it's important to still get that calcium. Somebody just asked, what is that? It could be an alternative beverage. It could be soy. It could be an almond beverage. There's the flavor, but also for a pantry staple, couldn't you use either evaporated milk or also dry milk powder?
Yes.
Those stay in the cupboard, which are excellent, especially when cooking.
Yes, 100%. And then on the opposite, you could use whipping cream. No, sorry, that's for another.
Okay.
That's for another cook along. We'll do a whipping cream version another.
Okay. Now, actually, on that, somebody just asked, could you use non-fat milk, so skim milk? Now, sometimes when you remove the fat,
so when you use skim milk, because there is no fat in there, the texture of the sauce is a little bit not as thick, which is fine. You're still going to get a lighter sauce, and it will work. So just because there's a little bit, it's almost, I don't want to say watery because it still does have texture in it. But you could definitely use skim milk in here as well. So not to worry. So what I'm looking for is just a little bit of a simmer. So I don't want this to boil. I just want a gentle simmer. So as soon as you start to see some bubbles, and they usually, much like that protein that cooks, start around the edge, okay? Once you see that, you're going to add your meatballs back in, okay? And as they sit, sometimes they accumulate some juice. You make sure you get that in there too, because that's gonna add flavor, okay? And see how they just get nestled in there beautifully? They fit perfectly. And then we're going to add that remainder of salt. Remember, we had that 1/4 teaspoon of salt that we didn't add. You're gonna add it to the sauce. So I'm just gonna get my 1/4 teaspoon measure here and sprinkle that around and give it a stir. Okay. And then we're just going to stir this around. And we're gonna let these just simmer and stir, okay, just for a few minutes. And I'm gonna grab my thermometer. So The two ways we're going to, as I said, the two ways we're going to test our meatballs, one is with an instant read thermometer. The other is, if you don't have an instant read thermometer, is to cut one open. It's dinner, it's a weeknight dinner. You're allowed to cut your meatball, okay, to check and see if it's done. So I'm going to get my thermometer out here ready. And we're also going to get our two colorful ingredients. I love red and green in pasta, and also very flavorful ingredients are baby arugula, as well as our roasted red peppers, okay? So I'm going to move my meatballs just a smidge over here for a moment. And I have to turn down the heat. We don't want them boiling over, because if any of you have ever had milk on your stove boil over, you know it's not fun to clean. Okay, I'm gonna just leave this spoon here so that I remember to stir it. And I'm gonna measure out 2 cups of baby arugula. So baby arugula, if you haven't had it, has a nice peppery bite. If you're not a fan of arugula, baby spinach would work here. Some chopped kale would be lovely. So you have lots of options to use. Now, this is just something that I do when I get, when I buy baby arugula, and typically in these types of tubs. When I get home, put it in my salad spinner, wash it, and then I put a paper towel on the bottom, and then I tuck it all back in, okay? Because I don't often need the whole container. So this means it's washed, it's ready to go, and I can add a handful to a salad, I can add a handful to a sandwich, wherever I want to, okay? So I'm gonna take out 2 cups. And if you love arugula, you could always add more, okay? So don't feel that, 2 cups is not your limit. You could definitely add more. Just adds a nice kick to the pasta dish. So I'm gonna take out my 2 cups like that.
This is great because everything is in one pot. I'm a big fan of that, especially if you're cooking for 1 or 2 people. You have your protein, your carbs, your calcium, your vegetables. It's all in one, and it's a cozy dish to eat just in one bowl, one plate.
And the other thing is that I think that a lot of our cook-along family and extended Osteoporosis Canada family love is leftovers. So this is a great recipe to use up leftovers. So if you happen to have cooked pasta that you didn't, eat the night before, you could add it to this. If you have leftover steak or leftover roast beef, you could chop it up and add it to the sauce and just warm it through. So it's a great place to use up leftovers as well. So you can kind of take bits and pieces of things and use this methodology of this kind of quick skillet meal to use up leftovers. You could add other vegetables. We're using the arugula and the roasted red peppers, but this could be leftover roasted potatoes. I know it's carb heavy, but I love pasta and potatoes. It could be frozen vegetables like mixed veggies or peas, whatever you happen to have on hand. And this is where you can kind of take something simple like this and recreate it so that it's what you love. So you don't even have to slice the red peppers. They're already sliced for you in a jar. So I'm just going to take, we need half a cup. So I'm just going to use a fork and scoop them out and put them into my dry measuring cup here. Okay. If you want them smaller, you could definitely chop them, but the sliced roasted red peppers are quite convenient to add to pasta dishes. And if you roast your own peppers, a half a cup, you'll need basically 1 roasted red pepper, okay, and then sliced up. And if you didn't have roasted red peppers, you could use a fresh pepper and just let it simmer in a little bit with the meatballs. Okay, there we are. How's everybody doing? I see heads down, focused. Thumbs up are good. That means that dinner's, and it truly is, dinner's almost done. Pasta should be cooked. Cheers. You have your last 2 ingredients. The meatballs are simmering away. So what I'm going to do is at this point, because I know these meatballs are literally like less than a minute than being done, I'm going to tell you what to do for those of you that cooked all your pasta, okay? So you're going to take out about 2 cups of this cooked pasta, okay? So I'm going to just do this. And what you're gonna do, let me just grab a bowl here. We don't need all this pasta. There. So take out about 2 cups cooked. I'm gonna take out a little extra, just because. Okay, and this cooked pasta that we have is gonna go into our skillet, okay? But in order, I'm just gonna put it back in the pot for a second. In order to keep this for a few days in your refrigerator, this is where you're going to rinse your pasta, okay? So just go to the sink with some cool water, give it a little rinse. You're cooling it down and you're removing some of the starch, okay? You can let it drain for a little bit and then just toss it with a little bit of oil, okay? And then you can just pop it into a Ziploc bag and it's ready to use later in the week. Don't keep it in the fridge for too long. Don't forget about it. But you can then quickly just heat up a sauce with the pasta in it to heat it through. And it's absolutely delicious. All right, so I'm just going to bring my skillet back here so I can show you. We're going to check the temperature of these meatballs. So just kind of go in the center, okay? And we're looking for 160, okay? Fahrenheit, which is what I'm at. So don't go all the way through, because if you hit the bottom of the pan, guess what? You're gonna get the temperature of the pan, not the meatball. And if you don't believe or trust your thermometer, because we do have, not trusting thermometers, all you need to do is take a fork and you can cut through it, take a peek. Hopefully it won't get dipped in the sauce, and make sure that it's no longer pink inside, okay? And you just add that half back to the sauce because it's just a smaller meatball. And then what we're gonna do is add all our delicious ingredients in there. So our cooked pasta and our arugula. You can just sprinkle the arugula on top if you want a fresher feel, but I like to heat everything through. Roasted red peppers, and then I'm just gonna stir everything together. Okay, just like that. So I know we spent some time chopping and talking and getting everything organized, but in the end, the actual cooking time is actually quite little because we did all that work ahead of time. So it is doable to get dinner done in, did we do it in under an hour, Tracie?
Well, but if you don't have us talking and have some technical difficulties, yeah, you get it done quicker, but this is the fun part, right? This definitely, by the time you cook the pasta and brown the meatballs, it's done.
That's right.
It's
and then this
done.
Is where that third cup, remember, this is sometimes where that division of ingredients gets a little tricky, but you can always measure it out. But in the end, you don't really have to add a third cup of cheese. You can add to your desire. If you only want to add a little bit, you can. But I'm going to take that third cup and sprinkle it all over. Just like that.
That looks amazing. How's everyone doing? Let's take a look. How's everyone doing? I see everyone busy. I've got Tina and Lily. Thumbs up. That's awesome. Oh, there's Michelle. She's showing us. Let's see. Yum. I know. It's all fun with it. Oh, and then we've got Sharon, who's busy cooking, and Deborah and Joyce. Everyone's oh, there we go. Oh, his meatballs are not ready yet. I think I saw a shake to the no with the meat thermometer.
And remember, if you made big meatballs, they're going to take a little bit longer to cook.
Yes,
so
that's what he was saying. Yes, absolutely.
If you are kind of wanting to, that's beautiful. I love that. If you are wanting to kind of speed things up, you can always cover the meatballs when they're in there for a little bit of time, but then you got to wash the lid. So that's why I didn't use the lid. I was a little bit, lazy on that one.
I know.
But it does really make for a faster meatball dinner, mainly because we didn't roll the meatballs. I know that sounds silly, but it just really makes for a wonderful, quick meatball skillet meal.
I know. And while you're going to do the hard part for us, you're going to do the taste test, but I actually have some more questions. So we're quickly going to, we're going to get some more questions. And so somebody asked, like, why arugula? Now, I love arugula and not everyone does, but it does actually have some calcium. And so that's, these are dishes, again, we're trying to get the bone building nutrients we need. So if you don't like arugula and you like kale, and at the end of the day, because you have the milk, you're still getting, if you want to use frozen peas or whatnot, whatever vegetable you want, but that's why it also adds really nice flavor. The other question is, so could we, like, I didn't cook all the pasta, so I'm going to have extra sauce and meatballs. Could I take part of the sauce and meatballs and freeze it so that I could do it another day? Or is that not something, what would you advise?
So if you're a smaller household, let's say you're cooking for 1 or 2, I would still cook the meatballs in the sauce completely and then divide up the sauce amongst pasta, or if you wanted rice, let's say, or couscous or quinoa, you could serve it over top that way. You don't have to mix everything in, but the meatballs and sauce, let them cool completely and then freeze whatever portion you want. I wouldn't bother adding the arugula or the roasted red peppers just because in the freezer, the texture is completely different. But that actually adds the freshness back when you go to reheat them out of the freezer. So this is a meal that easily serves 4 because we have that pound of ground beef in there. So again, you saw the numbers, 46 grams of protein and 450 milligrams of calcium. Like, that is amazing. You guys could all be Olympic athletes after eating this. And so what ends up happening is if you portion it out into 4 and freezing a couple portions, you have, lunch or dinner for later in the week or later in the month. And you can just add that arugula and roasted red pepper when you're serving it, and it looks beautiful. So I have a bowl here, and if you want to kind of freshen it up, and if you love arugula, you could just add another little bit of fresh on top, just like that, okay? And that will give you that fresh bite of pepperiness as you're enjoying it.
That's great. Now, we do have a question from someone who's asking about a kosher meal. So they don't mix the beef and the milk together. Now, sometimes it just means this is going to be more of a protein meal than calcium. And, you can make that up in other ways. So instead of using milk, what could you suggest?
Well, the meatballs themselves are very versatile on their own. So if you wanted to use them as we've used them tonight with the onion and garlic and the flour, what you could do is use beef broth in place of that milk so that you get a really beefy sauce and the meatballs, and then serve them over pasta. So you can still do the arugula and the roasted red peppers, and you're still going to get that creaminess, just not as creamy as using the milk, but it will still create almost like more of a gravy because of the flour and the beef. Okay. So the other thing I wanted to mention, Tracie, because this is a great simple meatball recipe, you can still use it as a standard meatball. So if you wanted to make the meatballs, roll them, you could freeze them raw and then pull them out and brown them later. Or I'm just going to show you, because I told you I made a couple things.
Sounds like you were busy today.
So I made these meatballs in sauce.
Yum.
Okay, so you can do the exact same process. You can make the meatballs, brown them, and then just put your favorite pasta sauce in there and simmer it, much like we did with the milk. And then you have another dish. So think about the recipe kind of in stages or as different things so that you can enjoy it. So we have a milk sauce, you can use a tomato sauce or the beef broth, and you have a great protein-based meal.
Absolutely. That is great. Before we wrap up, are you going to taste it, Emily?
Oh yes, I have.
You have to do it for all of us. Only a handful of us, unless we had other people cooking along at home. I see Michelle. Oh, Michelle, that looks great. That looks great. You guys are enjoying that. Oh, we've got other people. Yeah.
It was so good, Emily. Thank you. It was delicious.
Oh, I'm so glad you guys enjoyed it. I love when I get to cook with people. I mean,
absolutely. I see Amanda and Annette. How did everything go, everyone?
It's great. It's really nice. It looks really nice. We haven't tasted it yet. I just have a question about, I saw you have upcoming cook-alongs.
Yes.
I know we can't participate, but if you register to view it, do you send out the recipe ahead of time so you can cook along anyway?
Absolutely. And I'm going to thank you, Annette, for bringing that up, because there's
Hey.
always something that we're doing with Emily. That's awesome. So yes, we will definitely do. Oh, there we go. Awesome. Let me just see here who's Corrine and Tina and Elizabeth, Sharon, Deborah. How's everyone? And Joyce? We're all good. Oh, that's so great. Well, Emily, this looks amazing. And I hope we answered as many questions as possible. I didn't have a chance at the beginning, but we're going to still do it. So we always give an apron. I'm too short for you to see it on me, but Emily is modeling the apron. And so if you registered to watch, because we wanted to include people who are watching and you're still here. So the person who will be getting an apron is Kathy Murray from Regina in Saskatchewan. So congratulations, Kathy. I'm going to email you and we're going to send you an unbreakable apron so that, yay, she said yay, so that you can cook at home as well. And I'm just going to, so thanks to all our cook along participants. And let me just because it's always fun when you're using Zoom. You never want to share the wrong thing. Let me just do that. All right. So speaking of the other cook along, so we definitely want to share this with you. We have 2 more cook alongs coming up in March. Now, so groceries are delivered by Longo's, and we have them in St. Catharines and in Burlington. And again, these are all recipes, strategies to get the bone building nutrients you need in March. On March 8th, we're going to do homemade spinach ricotta gnocchi. And these are great because we're going to show you how to make them by hand, and then you can pop them in the freezer, whatever you don't cook. And then we're going to be doing a spiced lentil shakshuka at the end of March. So these are all great things. For $15, if you're in those areas, you get the apron, you get the ingredients delivered to your house the day before. And for anybody else who, either if you're not able to cook along with us, or if you're in a different part of the country, definitely register and we can go through the recipe together. So you can just register at osteoporosis.ca/cook along. Few resources for you so that we can make bone health a priority. We've got the calcium calculator on the website. We've got amazing podcasts. So if you have iTunes or Stitcher, you can find our podcast there, also on the website. We have the Know Your Risk quiz, and this is recorded. So if you want to go back and watch this again and see how Emily, did a certain technique or whatnot, on the OC Replay webpage, not just this webinar, we have a whole bunch of other webinars. So you can go back and rewatch some of your favorites or some of the ones that you have missed. And we want to thank beef.ca, because when we have great partners, we get to do great work like this. And we're so glad you all joined us. And of course, to Emily, who always makes our cooking demos and cook-alongs delicious and fabulous. So also you can subscribe to our newsletter. And that way, this will come into your inbox. You'll get the information, and you'll know when we are doing all these different kinds of activities. So thank you to everyone. Stay safe, be well, happy cooking, strong bones. And until next time, have a great rest of your evening. Take care, everyone. Bye.